Have you ever walked into a room and just completely forgot why you were there? Or, frantically used your phone's flashlight to search for the exact phone you're literally holding in your hand? We usually just laugh those moments off, right? We call it a brain fart, a glitch, a temporary lapse in judgment. But what if I told you that this exact same glitch, the one that makes you forget where you put your keys, is actually capable of causing unimaginable horror? Today, we're doing a deep explainer on the dark, hidden architecture of the human mind. We're going to explore why our brains actively betray us and why this terrifying biological flaw is actually the only thing keeping us alive. Our story starts on a freezing cold morning in Virginia, March 30th, 2007. A woman named Lynn Balfour is at work, just going about her day, when she gets a phone call from her babysitter. And the babysitter asks a really simple question. "Mrs. Lynn, why didn't you bring the boy today?" Lynn's blood literally turns to ice. She replies, "I brought him to you this morning." But she hadn't. Lynn sprints out to the parking lot, and right there, strapped in his car seat, is her 9-month-old son, Bryce. She had forgotten to drop him off. She just went straight to work on autopilot, and tragically, Bryce died of suffocation. It's a visceral, deeply, deeply disturbing nightmare. It's the kind of story that just makes you physically sick to your stomach. But here is the absolute most chilling part of all of this. 38. This isn't just some freak one-off anomaly. This devastating nightmare happens an average of 38 times a year in the United States alone. That's roughly 3 times a month, and it's been happening consistently, year after year, from the 1990s right up to today. Now, when we hear stories like this, our very first instinct is to judge, right? We desperately want to believe that these are just bad, neglectful people because that makes us feel safe. But the data tells a much, much more terrifying story. The parents this happens to, they aren't neglectful. They come from incredibly diverse backgrounds. We're talking rich, poor, doctors, teachers, incredibly devoted mothers and fathers. These are the exact people who obsess over baby-proofing their homes, who buy the absolute safest, top-of-the-line car seats. There is zero intentional negligence here, no conscious motive. Instead, under the crushing weight of modern life, a crucial part of their highly evolved human brain simply shut down. It went completely absent. Which brings us to the really terrifying reality of living in our modern, hyper-stressed world. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, Anatomy of an Overloaded Brain, How Stress Hacks the System. You see, we really love to think of the human brain as this perfectly ordered, flawlessly logical supercomputer. But in reality, it operates a lot more like a super chaotic corporate hierarchy inside a massive multinational company. At the very top of this hierarchy, you have the CEO. That's the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of you that analyzes, makes complex decisions, and actually understands the world around you. Right below the CEO is the head of archives, the hippocampus. That guy meticulously stores and retrieves the information you need. But way, way down in the basement of this company, you have a low-level employee called the basal ganglia. Let's just call him the intern. Now, the intern is blind, he's kind of foolish, and he only knows how to do completely repetitive, mindless routines. Brushing your teeth, walking, or driving your exact usual route to work. The intern doesn't think. He doesn't adapt. He just perfectly executes habits. So let's actually look at the exact sequence of Lynn's morning through this biological lens. First off, she was severely exhausted. Her son had been up all night with a cold, so she was running on fumes. Second, during her morning drive, she was dealing with highly distracting, incredibly stressful work calls from a relative and her manager. And finally, her son was asleep, totally silent, and sitting in a completely different, hidden car seat behind her because his usual one was broken. This immense cocktail of stress, exhaustion, and distraction basically forced her brain's CEO and head of archives to literally fall asleep at the wheel. The highly developed prefrontal cortex completely shut down to conserve energy. And who took over the company? The intern, the ganglia. It put her on total blind autopilot. The intern doesn't know there's a baby in the car. Actually, scratch that. The intern doesn't know anything. The intern only knows the routine. Drive to work, park, lock the door, walk inside. As molecular physiologist David Diamond points out, if you are physically capable of forgetting your cell phone, you are mechanically capable of forgetting a child. It is the exact same catastrophic system failure. But this whole thing raises a fascinating, honestly, deeply unsettling question. What if forgetting isn't just an accident? What if your brain is actually conspiring to make you forget on purpose? For a really long time, neuroscience just viewed forgetting as a weakness, right? Like a tragic biological glitch. But modern research suggests something entirely different. Forgetting is actually an intentional, aggressive system operating directly parallel to memory. As neuroscientist Ronald Davis puts it, perhaps forgetting is the brain's primary function.
Just think about the modern world for a second. The endless doom scrolling, the millions of notifications, the physical sensation of a sock on your left foot, the exact shade of blue on a stranger's shirt. If your brain didn't aggressively and constantly hit delete on all this utterly useless noise, you would be entirely paralyzed. You literally wouldn't be able to make a single decision. Forgetting isn't a flaw. It's a profound biological necessity just to survive.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is Section 2, the curse of perfect memory, the nightmare of an unfiltered past. We actually know what happens when the brain's deletion system totally fails. We know exactly what it looks like to have a perfect memory, and honestly, it is an absolute nightmare. This brings us to the timeline of Jill Price. She's the first scientifically documented case of extraordinary autobiographical memory. Jill basically remembers virtually every single day of her life since she was 14 years old. If you ask her about a completely random Tuesday in 1984, she knows it. February 18th, 1997, she knows exactly what she ate for lunch. February 2nd, 2005, she knows precisely what she was wearing, the weather outside, and what was playing on the news. You might hear that and think, wow, that sounds like a superpower, right? Like you'd ace every single exam, you'd probably win a Nobel Prize. But she didn't. Instead, Jill's life was incredibly difficult. She literally wrote a book called The Woman Who Can't Forget. Her condition is just impossibly emotionally draining because her mind is constantly chained to the past, forever bombarded by this unfiltered stream of secondary useless information. Her ability to actually focus on the present moment is deeply impaired. She couldn't study well, she struggled massively to plan for the future, and this isn't just a human limitation. Even artificial intelligence proves this point. When Google's DeepMind built an insanely advanced AI to play Atari games, they quickly realized that if the AI remembered every single pixel and movement, it would overload, hallucinate, and just completely fail. The engineers literally had to actively teach this multi-million-dollar AI how to forget, just so it could function properly.
Section 3, Why Survival Requires Forgetting, Escaping the Painful Past. You see, this need to forget isn't just true for stressed individuals or overwhelmed artificial intelligence. Let's scale up the tension here. Entire populations and societies desperately need to hit delete on their collective trauma. Without the ability to forget, human civilization would almost certainly destroy itself. We'd be completely unable to escape our own painful history. Just look at the staggering casualties of World War II. Millions upon millions of lives lost. Entire cities reduced to ash. Germany lost 8 million people. France, Italy, and Britain lost around 500,000 each. Neighbors literally slaughtered neighbors. And yet, almost immediately after the war ended, these countries reconciled. They opened their borders, they started trading goods, and they built lasting alliances. I mean, how is that psychologically possible? How on earth do you casually shake hands with the people who just destroyed your country? They did it through a desperate mechanism of survival. As the poet Hans Magnus Enzensberger beautifully noted, Europeans took shelter behind a collective amnesia. In France, historians actually refer to this as the Vichy syndrome. During the war, the French government, which was based in Vichy, actively collaborated with the Nazis. They participated in horrific oppressions. But after the war, an entire society essentially formed this dark, unspoken pact to just completely ignore their brutal complicity. They collectively chose to hit delete, to forget the dark parts and strictly remember the resistance, purely so they could function, rebuild, and actually establish a future alongside Germany. It perfectly highlights this brilliant piece of emotional intelligence from the author Naguib Mahfouz. Whoever carries the past, his steps falter. Letting go of those bitter grudges, that deep hatred, and that crushing historical trauma is very often the only possible way to establish a new identity. Think about it. If these nations had clung to an absolutely unfiltered, perfect memory of every single wrong ever committed against them, they would have just drowned in an endless, bloody cycle of revenge. Forgetting was literally their life raft. Section 4, The Science of Letting Go, the Paradox of Closure. But wait, there is a massive flaw in this kind of forced forgetting. You can't simply sweep trauma under the rug and expect it to magically vanish. By the 1970s, 30 years after the war, France's suppressed guilt completely exploded into what was called memory activism. The unspoken agreement totally fractured. Because the truth is, the brain doesn't actually delete these deeply painful memories, it just temporarily loses the ability to retrieve them. And if a memory is actively suppressed without being resolved, it haunts you. And this brilliantly illustrates a core psychological principle known as the Zeigarnik effect. Discovered back in the 1920s by a Russian psychologist named Bluma Zeigarnik, she noticed that waiters in a cafe could perfectly remember super complex unpaid orders. But the absolute second the bill was paid, they instantly forgot everything the customer had eaten. The Zeigarnik effect dictates that incomplete tasks create intense cognitive tension. Your brain involuntarily obsesses over unfinished business. It bounces around inside your mind, fueling our modern rumination, our endless anxiety, and those midnight panic attacks.
So, if sweeping things under the rug just creates endless cognitive tension, how do you actually tell your brain to let it go? Well, you do the exact opposite of hiding it. You dig it all up. This is the absolutely brilliant mechanism behind truth and reconciliation committees, like the ones used in Rwanda and South Africa after horrific historical atrocities. You literally bring the victims forward to unearth the trauma. You have the perpetrators publicly confessed, you record a deeply comprehensive report, you force yourself to look the monster directly in the eyes, getting every single horrific detail out into the open. By deeply confronting the truth and thoroughly, painstakingly documenting it, you're basically applying the Zeigarnik effect on a massive societal scale. You're giving the brain the ultimate final signal. It is over. Mark the checkbox completed. The tension breaks. The loop closes. Because the story is finally fully told and recorded outside the mind, the brain realizes it no longer needs to carry the weight of holding on to that trauma. You see, you don't forget by hiding the dirt. You forget by spreading it all out, acknowledging it, and finally checking the box. We spend so much of our lives terrified of forgetting. We curse our brains when we lose our keys, and we are rightfully, profoundly horrified when the biological autopilot of our overloaded minds leads to unimaginable tragedies, like a child left in a car. But as we pull back all these layers, we start to see the profound, beautiful duality of the human mind. Forgetting isn't just a shameful glitch. In a modern world overflowing with constant noise, deep pain, and infinite information, the ability to let go is actually a profound, life-saving weapon. It is a necessary cure for the human condition.
So I want you to think about the things keeping you awake at night. The past mistakes, the burning anxieties, the unclosed loops playing over and over in your head. Look inward for a second and ask yourself, what are you refusing to finish that your brain is refusing to forget? Confront it. Complete the narrative, because only then can you finally let it go.